Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this conference session on creating an inclusive culture for your parent carer forum. And also we're going to be looking at developing an equality, diversity and inclusion policy as well. Anyone who attended the last session on the toolkit at the last conference will know that the toolkit we recently developed had in mind that parent carer forums, we want them to be able to reach out confidently into the communities to ensure that everyone's voice is heard, listened to, and is part of service development. So we encourage all forums to download the toolkit and use it. And we will be offering some support next year to forums on using the toolkit and on planning and developing an EDI policy. Another thing that's going to be happening next year is that as part of receiving the grant, it will be a condition that all forums actually have EDI training or training on diversity. So we will be in touch about that in due course. And we've also this year, you'll find out next week, redesigned the diversity section in the grant monitoring form to make it a bit more meaningful and to help forums to identify those communities that they're reaching and where the gaps might be. And also to look at some specific outreach to different groups that then we hope to be able to capture some good practice within that. You might recall from the last conference that we've been working with Include Me Too, Changing Our Lives, on the Learning Disability England work to support the engagement of Black, Asian and minority ethnic families with children and young people with learning disabilities, as these communities don't get equal access to healthcare. So we're developing training there with 15 forums and that'll be co-produced, and we'll be using some of the exercises that are in the toolkit. So we hope to strengthen the work that they're already doing and looking at anti-racism and tackling health inequalities. So to support the work, the credibility of parent carer forums on your work with local partners and families, is vital that forums do build an inclusive culture. And we're joined this evening by Katie from Diversity Trust, who many of you will recognise from past sessions.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Katie. Thank you for joining us. And Katie is going to be talking through how we can, how forums can develop an inclusive culture, and just really to set things right from the start, and to help with that policy as well. So I'm going to hand you over to Katie now, who's going to take over. Thanks, Katie.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you very much. Sharing my screen, everybody. Bear with. Okay, so good evening, everyone. It's good to be here. It's good to be back with you. And thank you for that introduction. And actually, it's really important and that you just touched on an interesting point, actually. And I call it the chicken and egg dilemma when it comes to policy, because what is more important, okay, that we've got the policy in place to underpin the culture, or that the culture informs the policy, okay? And I just keep thinking about that as we go through the session today. You know, which one should really come first? How do you think it, you know, should work with it in your parent forum at the moment? So we're launching the new EDI policy for parent care and forums, and I'm going to take you through it today and all the components of it and how to get the very best from it. So I'm an inclusion and cohesion specialist. I've been working in communities and building sustainable communities for the last 15 years. I have developed and designed training for public sector, private and community sector organisations. I developed a programme called the Anti-Hate Crime Ambassador Programme that was rolled out across a local authority after receiving £90,000 in funding from the Prevent Agenda. And I've acted as strategic D&I lead for previous employers. So I'm now the founder of a consultancy as well that goes into organisations and helps them to create inclusive cultures that reflects the customers that they serve. But today I'm here with my Diversity Trust hat on, very much representing Diversity Trust and the influence on social change. Okay, so that's my kind of professional credentials that allow me to sit here in this room with you. But on the academic, my academic journey, I dedicated to international relations, social psychology and community development. And actually from a personal perspective, which I think is really important to understand how people kind of get into this line of work. I'm dual heritage. My father's of Jamaican heritage. My mother's English Irish. I'm neurodivergent. I'm very proud of my womanhood and my working class roots. Okay, so this is who I, this is who I am. This is I put myself out into the world, and how, I'm very aware of how society greets me or receives me. And I'm very, I've got a lot of lived experience of how I've had to navigate those things as well, based on those protected characteristics of, that I've just described. And that's what they would be called in our law. Okay, so in the Equalities Act 2010, that's just kind of a few of the characteristics that are listed, except economic status. But we'll venture into that conversation shortly. So just to set the tone for the room, there's about 33 of us in this space, so and people are still coming in. So I just want to create a bit of a learning agreement. They used to be called rules, didn't they? But rules are meant to be broken. So, and people did on this subject matter. So we are creating brave spaces. Okay, we're moving away from this idea of psychological safety, because arguably, when we're talking about social justice, we're likely to have the affected and the affectors in the same space. And so we need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable and brave when we're having this conversation, okay, around equality and equity. Have the discussion. So there are a team actually operating behind the scenes right now. And so if you've got any questions, okay, and you want to ask something as we go, please just pop it in the chat, and we will, I'm happy to answer questions as we go, basically, as well as leaving some space at the end of the session to be able to explore what we've discussed. Okay, so just a bit of an overview as to what we're going to cover in the next hour or so is the definitions of equality, diversity and inclusion, which if you've been on this training with me before, you would have heard once, but that kind of foundational building is good, and that repetitivity, it will hopefully make it hold. We'll look at the equalities policy, the new equalities policy, and the components that make it up, and actually the essential components that need to sit within that policy. There's two. Okay, and I think that's probably a good thing to be aware of. There's a really comprehensive version that's available to you, and then there's a version that we've condensed down with the essentials. Okay, either or are available for your parent care forum to download and adapt as you see fit, and almost customize to your character. Yeah, your parent carer forum's character. Who are you? What are the demographics locally? How does where you are geographically affect the people that come onto your forum? So, and every policy looks different depending on the industry of a organization, depending on the sector of an organization. So all those things will kind of come out as we discuss. We're going to do something called the pyramid activity. Really looking forward to this. So we'll have a bit of breakout room activity where you'll get to meet some other people from different forums and talk about this subject matter and how it's showing up for you in your area. And then we'll give a nod to the Equalities Act 2010, mammoth piece of legislation, but I've kind of reduced it, okay, or if you like, or we've managed to put it into a format that is easier to remember. Okay, and you'll see what I mean when we get there, because it is quite a big piece of legislation. Actually, it contains over 100 pieces of legislation. In 2010, it was condensed because it was basically over 100 pieces of legislation just kind of brought into one space, because there were so many policies under the EDI kind of umbrella. So before we delve in, I just want to get a sense of what we've got in the room, okay? And so I've got a question for you. Does your parent carer forum currently have an EDI policy? Okay. So does your parent carer forum currently have an EDI policy? I think I might have to stop sharing a minute to be able to launch this poll. Yeah. Thank you. Right, okay, so I'm ending poll now. Thank you for those that contributed, and I'm going to share the results with you, okay? So out of 31 participants, 26 answered, and these are the results, okay? So we've got 35% say yes, they do have a policy, 23% say no, and 42% say they don't know, okay? So that's really interesting. That's really interesting for me. That really does help me to do a temperature check of what's going on in the room. So thank you very much. Right, so interesting. What I'm going to do first is start off with some definitions around equality, diversity and inclusion. Okay, and so what does it mean really? What are we doing? Why is this important now, currently? Equality is the right of all human beings to be treated equally and in dignity, to be treated with respect and consideration, and to participate on an equal basis with others in areas of economic, social, political, and cultural and civil life. Okay, so that statement's wonderful, and that's really aspirational for us all to to want to achieve, and to make sure that our parent caring forums are creating this environment and this space for people to come and be their authentic selves and self-actualize. However, what we need to be mindful of when it comes to equality is this idea of equity, okay, and how actually when we're giving everybody the same, we're not necessarily delving into people's individual difference and individual need. Okay, and that's where equity comes into this conversation in a big way. So we assess people, okay, in their current circumstances based on what they need. Now, we do this really well with disability, and especially within professional settings, we're very good at making reasonable adjustments, okay? But when it comes to the other protected characteristics that exist, which we'll explore shortly, not so good, okay? So when it comes to race and religion, okay, age, there's, to name but a few, there's some work to do. Okay, so when we're thinking about what equality means. Now, this idea of diversity is the mosaic of people who bring a variety of backgrounds, styles, perspectives, values, and beliefs as assets to the groups and organizations with which they interact. And actually out in industry at the moment, I'm seeing this, this in a really big way, because we've got the most diverse generations we've seen yet. Yeah, with the millennials, the Gen Zs, okay, the diversity in this country, there's like I say, the most diverse generations yet. And so this idea of cognitive diversity being a vehicle or a portal for innovation and creativity is being seen as a real value add for organizations. Yeah, so diversity is absolutely aspirational as well. And then this idea of inclusion. Okay, so the act of including, the state of being included. I've often heard it described as this idea of being invited, not only being invited to the party, but asked to dance. Yeah, so not just being able to get in the room, but how do you become an integral part of what's happening on a day-to-day basis, and the decision making, and and the culture building. Yeah, so EDI definitions. So the reason we're all here today is to celebrate the launch of the new EDI policy that you're going to be given access to. And as I said, there is a quite a comprehensive version, and there is a shorter version that's been created for you. And so depending on where you are on this journey, because based on that poll, a lot of the forums that have already got a policy in place, they might want to take the more comprehensive one, okay, and start to work with that to build on what they've already got to build on the foundations. But people are just coming out of the gate with this, or just beginning to think about it, maybe the shorter version might be a good place to start the conversation. But to be mindful that the policy and the toolkit go hand in glove, okay? So the policy is gonna really spark a lot of conversation amongst your forum, and get you thinking really about what you need to do and how to start doing it. And the toolkit will provide you the tools to be able to do that. Okay, so it's the launch and the creation of these two tools has been intentional, absolutely intentional for the forums. Now, what you'll find in this policy as kind of essential to the policy is an outline of legislation. So law currently as it stands when it comes to equality, diversity and inclusion. So this will be an outline or an appendices of the Equalities Act 2010. Okay, so that's a really important component, because actually fundamentally, when you know, if we ever actually do have to draw on the policy that underpins, or somebody wants to make a complaint or anything like that, the policy that underpins this policy is the Equalities Act 2010. Yeah, and so this, we need to make sure that it covers, and they both cover staff, service users and volunteers in this case, and it breaks down how people are protected by this policy, or how, you know, the culture of your forum should be protected. So against discrimination, against victimization, against harassment, for example, and exactly what that means. Okay, what those components mean within the policy. Then there should be quite clear guidelines as to if people want to make a complaint. Okay, so that should be made as easy as possible for people that want to do that. Okay, and so a nice section in there about kind of who, how and what around complaints. And then we've got a piece around recruitment and removing bias from the recruitment process, okay, to the forums. And actually recruitment and bias is quite a complex beast. The recruitment is actually riddled with our bias at every touch point, from shortlisting to actually writing a job description or a role description or volunteer description, to shortlisting, to onboarding, to, you know, to all the points of a recruitment process. So what this policy does really, when we're thinking about recruitment, it says how you're going to mitigate those biases, how you're going to work to make sure that that advert is getting out to as a wide and diverse audience as possible, for example. Okay, and how you'll shortlist to make it as a kind of even as possible, to name just a couple of examples. Then also within the same policy, it talks to advertising, okay, and how you promote the services and the pictures that you use when you're promoting the services, and how far and wide that promotion goes. Okay, so it's an encouragement and it's a commitment of your thought forum to say, this is what we deem important, and this is how far we'll take it. Yeah, because we want to reach audiences that are far and wide. There's also a section in there about monitoring. So how are you, if you do implement this policy, for example, if you're a forum that hasn't got one, then quite quickly you'll realize that actually you need some numbers to be able to measure some of the requests that this policy makes of an organization. So you need to know how diverse your staff team are. You need to know, say, the demographics of women versus men versus religion versus race versus LGBTQ+, okay? Now, obviously, this is all voluntary data. You know, people don't have to give you this. But if they do, and if they're willing to, you can improve your services based on it. You know, you can cater more effectively to your membership. Okay. There's also a component in there around training, and so continued professional development. What is your commitment for the forum? You know, is it that people will do EDI training annually? Okay, and then follow up with a refresher every 3 years. You know, you need to think about what that looks like for your organization in terms of learning and development. And then finally, the policy finishes with a commitment to the communication. So who's going to see this policy? How far and wide will it go within your forum? Who signs it off? Who's responsible for kind of leading on it? Have you got an allocated person on your team that will lead on this kind of subject matter? And then a review date. So who gets to sign, you know, who's going to sign it off and who's going to commit to reviewing it every year? Yeah. So when we think about an EDI policy, those are the main components of an EDI policy. How comprehensive it is and how much it reflects your parent forum is going to be up to you. Yeah, when it comes to adapting it and making it really kind of customized to your forum. Any questions so far? Anything in the chat? No?
All quiet on the chat front.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we're going to go into an activity now. Okay, and I'm going to just talk you through it before I put the link in the chat. Okay, so you're going to go out off into breakout rooms for 10 minutes and you're going to discuss this idea of diversity. Okay, and I'm going to give you 6 statements. And I want you, in the group that you're placed in, I want you to obviously introduce yourselves to one another, do the pleasantries. But what I want you to do is put the 6 statements I'm going to give you into order of priority. 1 being the most important, 6 being the least important. Okay, so that's your task in the breakout room. Okay, and the challenge is to come to a consensus on this. Okay, because what quickly comes to the surface is people's different lived experiences and priorities and value systems. Okay, so let's watch how that shows up. So this is the slide, and I'm going to give you a link to this slide now in the chat. Okay, right, I'm just going to put the link in the chat. It should open up quite nicely on your screen. And if somebody could share it, if somebody in the room feels confident to share the Zoom link, that would be great. So just checking that everyone's got that first of all. Yeah, excellent, wonderful. Now, you will have 10 minutes to do this, and there should be a button that brings you back into the main room should you have any questions or ask for help. Okay, there's an action that allows you to do that. Okay, so opening rooms now. Hello everybody, welcome back. I don't know about you, but that was awesome. I got put in a room with London, Nottingham, Herefordshire, and I'm from Bristol. And we had a great conversation. So I want to just open it up to the floor and just, you know, we can't hear from everybody, but just tell me how that, if anybody feels confident enough to tell me how that was for them and how they arrived at, say, number 1 and number 6. I've got a few points that I'm happy to share quickly, if just to get us warmed up. For me,
Katie, I'll share.
Oh, please.
Hi, my name is Nosheen. I'm from Swindon St. Family's Voice in Swindon. In our group, we said E was number 1.
Right. E was number 1.
There.
E was number 1. Yeah.
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 And we only got to 3 and 4, 2 and 3, so we didn't get to 6. Sorry.
That's all right. What was your 2 and 3?
F and then A.
F and then A. This is really, yeah, fantastic. And what did you notice about the conversation? And what I mean by that is in the room that I was in, and this doesn't happen when I work in businesses, there was a completely different logic applied to creating this order, which was based in the life cycle and nurturing. Which I thought was wonderful. So what people were talking to, first of all, was this idea that we need to accept difference, okay, and acknowledge difference and accept bias, okay, that exists before we can start to have the conversation to move on to create the initiatives or develop various services, because we need to acknowledge the difference before we can get to that point, and then we can move beyond. Yeah, anybody challenge that? Anybody have anything different? Please, a London region with your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, I'm Fazila. I'm having to keep going on and off because of my son, so yeah, apologies. Yeah, I would challenge it. That's my personal preference. The conversation we were having, and I have to say it was, you know, I was yeah, it's my personal view on this,
Yeah.
but the B's and the C's sound to me from an organizational perspective quite tokenistic. It sounds like every typical organization that goes, oh, we have equal ops on our recruitment activity, just to be polite.
Yeah.
And know that that's the thing they should be doing, and actually they're not living and breathing it. So the B's and the C's to me feel we're doing this because we have to.
Yeah.
So that, you know, to make the most of a diverse workforce, to me sounds like, well, we've got to do diversity, so we better make the best of it. So I strongly disagree with that, and I would have said the ones below are more important because they're about understanding the true nature of diversity, not that we have to be diverse to make us a better organization and tick a box.
Oh, fascinating. Yeah. And so no, it's brilliant. It's a brilliant perspective, and it's good. This is showing me something, actually, because I'm operating in business settings all the time, and it's you know, profit's the bottom line. So I have to have statistics in my back pocket, like, you know, the more diverse your organization, or the more you're embedding equality and diversity, the more competitive you'll be, and that you know, the World Economic Forum says that you will outperform industry peers by 25 to 36%. That's one of my, you can tell I've practiced
that because you're doing that to those organizations, or exactly, they're adopting that because they feel that they have to, because there's a what's in it for me, as in what, you know, you have to be diverse in order to get some benefit. Whereas I think we're looking, particularly from forums, is we should be embracing diversity for the sake of diversity and for the sake of difference, because our children, our young people, it's not about ticking a box or making things better for people. It's about social justice. This isn't right. This isn't a. So you can tell I'm very passionate.
Wonderful. Anybody else got anything they want to say? Is there anything coming in the chat? Shura, if I pronounce that right? Sharala?
Tarula. Hi,
Tarula.
good morning. Yes, I was in a really, for me, it was a very interesting group because I'm from Redbridge, EPT Redbridge.
Right.
And we decided that for us, if you look at it as, we got it as numbers. So A is the aspirational point. A is where we all want to be. Okay. Right?
Okay.
And then F, F is how we can do it. D and E and D is the building, and B and C is, as Fazila said, is the building blocks. Yeah. Is the evidence of where the local authority or the government will do the actual work, because they will only do it based, as you say, on the practical evidence. But one of the big things that when we talk about diversity, we usually include Black, Asian minorities. We don't talk about geographical differences, language barrier differences, which create the barrier. Yeah. And the group that I was in, I didn't even realize that we're talking about geography as also as a way of having people not being able to communicate. Right. Internet is not even available, even if it's available, it's sporadic and it's costly. We're not even talking about the economic we're talking about digital poverty, maybe. Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you. It's really interesting the way you group those into it fascinates me, always the logic that goes into the groupings. Okay, one more question before we're going to do it again, actually. We're going to do it again with 6 more statements, but these statements are rooted in equality of opportunity, and they're a little bit different. Okay, they have a different effect on the conversation. There's just any final thoughts before we do that? Okay, I'm just going to get the link ready. So now this time around, you've done it once, so you know what the expectation is. Okay, so once you get into the room, introduce yourselves, get familiar with the 6 statements, and what we want you to do is come to that consensus. Okay, come to that consensus, and whatever, and then talk, bring back the logic. I want to know equally what you chose, but also what was the thinking behind how you got there. Yeah.
Okay, Katie. So I've got the rooms ready.
Thank
Could
you.
you pop the link in the chat for us?
Just getting that now.
Lovely.
Sorry. No,
now, in theory, you're going to be in new mixed up rooms. So
Yeah.
you shouldn't be with the same people you were with. However, there are 9 rooms. So just by, from law of averages, somebody might be in a similar room. So if you aren't at all happy with the room that you're with, pop back in and I'll assign you to a different one.
Can I just confirm that everybody's got the link and it should be to the equal opportunity slide? See some nods. Yeah, Carolyn, I'm seeing you nodding. Wonderful. Okay, then let's go. 10 minutes from now and we'll feed back on the other side. Okay, another great room I landed myself in. I was in a room with London, Cambridgeshire, Scotland and Bristol. So this one isn't as easy, I've been told, and so I'd be really interested to see what come up for you, if anybody feels brave enough. In what I can say quite clearly is that in our room, anything with legislation or referring to legislation was put at the bottom. That was the kind of logical approach to it.
Can I just say something with all of this? And I've been into 2 different groups. It really makes a difference of who's in the room, because we all know what it should look like. So why are we getting it so wrong? Because we've all got different viewpoints. We all come with different things and bring to the table. But so I've been in 2 different groups and it's been really interesting. But I just felt that we all have this idea. So why are we getting things so wrong? Are we trying to put them into tick boxes? Or do you know what I mean? Because everybody's got that right to listen and equal playing field and opportunities. We're all saying it's a given. We're all in the room and agreeing that's what should be happening. So why isn't it?
Yeah.
Why are we getting this so wrong?
We were saying in our group that it depends on where you are, where you've come from in life, because your culture, your experiences, they all play a part in how you view things. So one person could be viewing it because they're coming from a more privileged standing, and another person that could be viewing it will be coming from a person who's not had those privileges. So their outlook, their understanding and what they would want is completely different. A person that's more privileged may think of more the law because that would benefit them, whereas a person less privileged will be thinking of culture and more of a holistic approach. So it's very hard to do it because everybody is looking at it from different angles, putting themselves in different positions to look at it. But we know what it is. We know that we all want to be on a level playing field.
So I'm Navita, and I would agree what Nosheen's saying, but it's important. We are all different, and we've been brought together by contact, but we all do come from different backgrounds. So it's that, dare I say, unconscious bias within us as well that we'll we'll think of different levels to go and slot them in different places according to how we are, the bias within us, unconscious bias within us. Which is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing, but that's how life is. If you go into the workplace, it's going to be like that. If you go into a supermarket, it's going to be like that. If you even in a household, it could be things could be like that. So it's kind of life.
Yeah. Right. Thank you. Sorry,
Katie, I just thought that my opinion was that there's no right or wrong answer. It's like everybody's entitled to how they perceive things, how they view things. So your opinion would be always different to mine, but it doesn't mean you're right and I'm wrong. So everybody's conception is always different.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Claire. And I'll take one final question on this because I need to move us on. I've got just letters, just the letters CF on the end.
Oh, sorry, that's me, and in PCF. So it's Ros Love.
Oh, hi, Ros.
Hi. Our group, we looked at A as being the number one sort of aspirational, that's how we'd like things to be.
Yeah.
But that 2 was the legal framework, because that's got all the protected characteristics. And often when we talk about equal opportunities and diversity, we think in silos and we forget some of them, especially things like age or sexual orientation. You know, you've got to keep that broad mind about all of those protected characteristics.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that. And that will take us nicely into the activities we're going to go on to do. But just to echo what Claire was saying, there isn't a wrong and a right answer. What shows up is really interesting in different settings, sectors, industries, okay, what people's priorities are in different industries. With that diversity slide just now, it was very, very clear that in this space, identity and acceptance of difference is there's a lot of passion for that. You know, that doesn't come through in other settings that I'm in. So that was really interesting. But to know who you are as well, what your values and principles are. So were you drawn to more legislative? Did that feel more comfortable because there was something written and there was a guide for you? Or were you drawn to the moral and ethical arguments of why we should do it? And again, it's no right or wrong, but to know what makes you tick. Okay, so to know what's going to motivate you to download that policy and customize it based on your parent carer forum and how it's likely to take shape based on our perceptions and our values and principles is key. Okay, so with that in mind, I just love this image, and this image just says 1,000 words for me. Okay, so the reality is we're dealing with real disparity, real division, okay? And 2020 revealed this in a big way with the pandemic. Yeah, we had, Black Lives Matter erupting all over the world. We had women in this country disproportionately affected by domestic violence, parents disproportionately affected by poverty, older people left out of contingency plans. Nobody was exempt, it's safe to say. And when we view this through an equalities lens, okay, we give everybody the same. Yeah, we give everybody the same. And it's not enough for some, okay? And it's too much for others. And what we need to start to do is treat individuals based on their circumstances. Okay, so we see the equity model where we assess people where they are, living how they are. And give them the tools and the assets and the resources to self-actualize. And then ultimately what we want to do, and this is where this policy comes in, if we imagine the fence as that policy, okay, we want to pretty much be able to operate without it, because we've built such a positive, inclusive culture of belonging that we don't actually really need it. And that's the liberation. And that's when we're really free, that making reasonable adjustments and all those kind of things, because the bias isn't built in, or the barriers aren't there, because we've evolved to a point where we're not even putting them in place anymore, that we don't have to remove them. That's real kind of aspirational thinking. Yeah. So some of you may or may not be aware of a theory based on self-actualization, so Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I just give this a little nod because it's a really nice way to summarize that previous slide. So Maslow talks to the fact that we need certain things in place in our lives to be able to be our best selves, okay? And that starts with physiological safety. So a roof over our head, warmth, food in our bellies, okay? Safety, being free from, abuse, and physically safe. Social, so connection, love, yeah, community, yeah, a way in which we can reaffirm our identity by bouncing off of other people, and which in turn builds our self-esteem, builds the foundations of our personalities, who we are, what we believe, okay, what our values and principles are. And then we get to this point, this blue point of self-actualization, where we can start to stimulate our passions, you know, research or specialize or become experts in, or whatever it may look like, you know, but we get to self-actualize because these foundations are in place. Okay, and the reality is that's not everybody's portion, and especially when we're dealing with protected characteristics, the likelihood is these foundations aren't necessarily in place. Okay, so next poll, and we'll get it right this time, I promise. Helen, we'll get it right because you'll do it. If that's okay, I nominate you. So if we can launch this poll, please. Does bias exist at your parent carer forum? And it's anonymous. There's no, you know, as you know, based on the first ones, it doesn't give any away anyone's names or anything like that.
Okay, so we have 50% have said yes, 20% have said no, and 30% have said maybe.
Right, interesting. Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Do you want me to wait for a few more responses, or should I share that now?
Well, I've got an idea of the pattern, so it's all right actually, Helen, thank you. But make sure you capture that, because I think just based on that feedback, the next session I come and do, I think should be based on bias. Let's explore it a little bit more. Okay, because one of the realities of bias, okay, and is that we all have it. Nobody's exempt. Okay, so there are 9 protected characteristics in the equalities law, which we'll delve into shortly. And the reality is that we've all probably got some work to do around fully understanding each characteristic. And so when we think about breaking down barriers, promoting equality and equity, one of the first things we need to acknowledge is that accept is that we do all have biases. So it's a bit of a trick question, really. But it's understanding the mechanics of that bias so that we can start to mitigate it. We can start to checks and balance our own selves is really where the power lies. Any questions on that before I go into the next slide? Any questions on what we just discussed? Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm just going to take us on a whistle-stop tour of the Equalities Act. Okay, and so this is the digestible, bite-sized version of it. And so the Equalities Act 2010, as I said, is a mammoth piece of legislation with over 100, I think it's about 120 pieces of legislations amalgamated into the one. And so what you can see here is that we've in odd numbers from 9 through to 1, the key components of the Equalities Act, okay, and what you need to be aware of and know about. So we've got the 9 protected characteristics, 7 prohibited conducts, 5 permitted channels, 3 public compliances under the 1 Equalities Act, okay. I've never forgot it. Once it was talked to me like this, I've never forgot the main components, and then I get to repeat it on a daily basis anyway. So of course it's stuck. Okay, so 9 protected characteristics. So if you feel confident to speak out into the virtual room, please do, or put it in the chat. But I want to know if you know what the 9 protected characteristics are that feature in law. So these are characteristics that are protected. Personal characteristics that are protected from victimization, harassment, and discrimination. And we've spoken to quite a few of them already.
So the age and everything, age, sex.
Age, absolutely, thank you.
Sex.
Yeah, disabilities in the chat. Sex, thank you. Age, race, religion. Yeah. So we've had age, disability, sex, race, religion so far.
Sexual orientation.
Sexual orientation, thank you very much.
How many is that?
That's 6 so far.
Religion?
Yes, we've had religion and belief. That's how it features. Pregnancy and maternity, thank you. Gender reassignment, thank you. There's one more.
colour.
Marriage and civil partnership. Thank you. Yes, that is all 9. Okay, so that's what shows up within the Equalities Act, and that's what's protected. But I ask you a question. Are there any that you think should be there that aren't?
I think employment status.
Employment status.
Wealth as well, how wealthy or poverty, you know, how much poverty or wealth you're in.
Thank you. Yeah. It's really,
a bit off the mark, but I think looked after children should be in there too.
Looked after children, thank you.
It's presumed that they're protected, but it's not always their experience.
Great, thank you. What I will say is that in relation to employment and wealth, this is really interesting because economic status comes up and shows up in so many different ways and actually can make people incredibly vulnerable, okay? But it isn't protected.
I think mental health be a good one as well. Mental health. So mental health currently comes under disability, but there is an application in for it to be recognised in its own right. So thank you for that. Misogyny, thank you for that. Recently, unfortunately, it didn't qualify. So again, there was an application in for misogyny, for hate crime against women to be recognised, but in terms of reporting hate crime, I don't know what the logic is behind why it didn't, but it didn't, and that was a recent decision, literally weeks ago. Menopause is another one. Menopause is not protected and maybe should be. Yeah. Weight, hair color, hair texture. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so now we're looking at the 7 prohibited conducts. Okay, so discrimination, okay, direct discrimination, association or perception. Okay, and then or indirect discrimination. So when we think about, it's important, when we think about discrimination, how we need to look at it is that discrimination is an action. Okay, prejudice is an attitude. Discrimination is the action resulting from the attitude. So I'll ask you, if prejudice is an attitude and discrimination is an action, is it possible to be prejudiced and not discriminate? Is it possible to be prejudiced and not discriminate? Anybody feel brave? I won't labour too long. The answer is yes. Okay, it is possible to be prejudiced and hold prejudiced views and not discriminate. And the reason being is because we checks and balance, okay, our thought processes. Okay, we don't necessarily act on the first things that fly into our minds. But I will say, if we are spending long periods of time with people, like 37-hour working weeks with people that we hold prejudice or bias towards, it will show eventually. Okay, so be mindful of that. So we've got discrimination arising from disability, discrimination arising from gender reassignment and absence from work, discrimination arising from pregnancy, maternity, harassment and victimization. Okay, so those are the 7 prohibited acts that are protected, that feature in law. Okay. Now, when we think about the 5 positive actions, okay, so sorry, these are things that can be done to combat inequality or inequity. Okay, these are things that can be put in place for an organization. So positive action general, positive action political party. So how this might show up? You might have underrepresentation of a certain group within your forum, and you know, when we think about recruitment, let's think of it from a business perspective. We've had some candidates go for the same job, okay, and they've reached the same level of experience. They've got the same level of experience, the same criteria has been reached, so they're neck and neck. And then one happens to be from the LGBTQ+ community, and because there's an underrepresentation within that organisation, they get the job.
Okay, and the same kind of plays out in the political parties when we think of it. More favourable disabilities is reasonable adjustments and making sure that the environment is conducive. It also kind of ties in with occupational requirements as well for the role. And again, more favourable treatment disability. So we might see this in applications. So if somebody has a disability and they tick that box when they might be, well, they're likely to be guaranteed an interview in public sector. Okay, so it shows up differently in different settings, different sectors, sorry. Okay, and then we've got the Equalities Act and the 3 public compliances. So I was just saying to the team before actually we come on the call, this is an interesting one because everything that we discuss around the Equalities Act, the public sector are, you know, they have to lead by example and they obviously have to by law do it. But businesses aren't compelled to do these 3 and neither are charities. So it's a real aspirational move when charities do adopt this kind of approach and know-how. So we've got eliminating prohibited conduct, so breaking down barriers, okay, to advancement and opportunity, advancing equality of opportunity, so creating that level playing field and fostering good relationships and celebrating diversity. So all the work ideally that local authorities carry out should be underpinned by these three factors. And then it comes down again to the One Equalities Act. So those all feature under the One Equalities Act. Okay, so like I said, whistle stop tour, but that's what it looks like. And so when your policy refers to the Equalities Act 2010, that's what's in there. Got 10 minutes left. And so let's talk. Let's just open up the floor for 5 minutes before we summarize the session. Any questions, any observations? That's okay too. Oh, somebody just put their hand up.
Yeah, it's Jane.
Hi, Jane.
I'm from Rotherham. And it's just, I think this is phenomenal that we're having this conversation. I think the most important thing is that we keep having this conversation, you know, and taking this back to our forums and back again and back again and back again.
Yeah.
I just think it's really important that the most important thing for me to come out of all this is that we're having this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. London region. You've got your hand up.
Sorry, I'm trying to come off mute and on camera. If we're having a conversation, is it possible to go off the share so that we can?
Yeah,
talk?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of forums, to be fair, they do get it and we understand the importance, and I think they embrace it, because back to my point about we are expecting it for our children, why wouldn't we be doing that ourselves? I think for everyone it's about the how. So I was saying to Paolo, actually, I was going, oh, I'm so glad that you're a man coming on, and I said I didn't want to say that because it sounds sexist, but I genuinely believe that, because so for example in Enfield we're really, really, really diverse, religion, orientation, race, blah 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 blah, colour, but we don't have any men. So we're not, and I think we just scare them all off. So it's kind of like, and a lot of the forums say how do we reach out? Now I always think role modeling is helpful, and you have to practice what you preach.
Yeah.
But equally, I think there's some mechanics that sit behind it. And I think that's what a lot of the forums kind of want to understand is, how do we practically go about this?
Yes. So the toolkit is a fantastic resource. I don't know if you've downloaded it or seen it, but it is it is the how-to. It is literally the how-to. Several organizations have come together and built a how-to kit, and actually I know because I was a part of it. So a lot of the toolkit is based on community development principles as well. You know, the how-to based on community development. So thank you for that. Really. So who's next? There's somebody else with their hand up. Oh, I'm sorry, I've lost the attendee. Oh, there we go. Navita, thank you.
Oh, I don't know what I'm doing here. Yeah, no, because I'm from an area in London that we're just, well, no, I'm not in London, I'm just southeast now. I used to be in London. But we're just in the initial stages of setting up a steering group. So we've got a bunch of people, but I can already see like we're diverse, but there's differences.
Yes.
But we have to work with what we have at the moment, I feel, because we don't know what the journey is going to be like. I personally feel that we don't really know. So I'm sure there'll be people that will step down, we'll get other people stepping up, but we have to make a start. So diversity is really important, but I think it's important that we've got a group of people that start talking about the most important thing is that we're looking at disabilities at the moment. So that's the start of the journey, but we will have to look at, we do have to have a policy about equality and diversity. So that's something that's really key. But I think initially at the moment, the way I look at it, we've got to get down, sit together and talk.
Yeah. And so for me, what's really important there is to acknowledge the common threads, right? The what's bringing you together, and that common purpose. So identify the common purpose, but don't ignore the differences, because what can happen is you'll create in groups and out groups or cliques, basically.
Yeah.
So acknowledge the common purpose, but also celebrate the difference.
Okay.
Claire?
For us on a practical level, we've got the parents that have stepped forward to be part of the forum, and one thing that we're doing, which approach we've taken so far, is I've talked with our council's comms lead, and they basically have got a group of community champions they've developed through COVID, and we're going to start by having a discussion with them about the SEND needs in their community, all the communities, so that we can start to look at how they think we should interact with them, because it's not really fair to assume that everybody wants to interact on Facebook or join a parent carer forum or do that kind of thing. So I think there's a bit of kind of like we've got, we need to do all this stuff, but also we need to be realistic and work out what's the best way, because we're basically as forums trying to find out what the issues are amongst our communities and making sure that they're represented to the councils. And actually lots of communities that we're not reaching could actually have the same issues, or they could have different or more higher degrees or different things. So we just need to find that out as much as anything. And I think there's a bit of balance with not trying too hard with all the other things we're trying to do as well, if you know what I mean. So it's very important, but we can't do everything, with the time and resource that we've got. So it's kind of, how do you balance it as best you can? So we've come up with this route of trying to work out how the community champions want to do and how they think we should approach things. So, just an idea of where we're at. So in the toolkit, it talks to doing a local audit, like a mapping activity of what's local, which is and ways to go about that. But also, the promotional and advertising side of things it can be really expensive, really costly, and really energy consuming. So using smart tools like SurveyMonkey, if you do use electronic versions to reach out to your potential members, they've got smart analytics underpinning them, so you can find out who's clicked on what, how many people actually did open it. And then you can start to assess whether it's in your interest to use certain mechanisms. Yeah. Thank you, Claire. Jane?
Yeah, I think for us in Rotherham, I think we've over the last 12 years, what we've tried to do, and I think we've done quite successfully, is it's kind of take your shoes off. You're on holy ground in other communities and in all communities. So as a forum, we're about gathering voice and making sure that everybody's voice feeds into shaping policy locally and better outcomes for children everywhere. And we have got some phenomenal groups, but they're very clear about that. They want to stay in those communities, don't particularly want to interact. So it's about respect as well. It's about having meaningful, real, respectful relationships with each of those communities.
Yes, I agree. And I challenge a little bit about the wanting to stay in their communities. I believe there needs to be an invitation, absolutely, and there needs to be a willingness to partake, but it's actually the whole assimilation, code switching, covering. There's a whole school of thought about why people don't come out. Again, maybe that's another session.
Yeah,
because
and that absolutely is happening, but more and more people from those communities, because it's about relationship, I think,
yes.
Kate, more, and once relationships are built, then
I'd say trust. I'd say trust.
Yeah, and absolutely feeling welcomed and cared for and valued and included. Because the common denominator we all have in Rotherham is that we all know what it's like to go to Asda, or rather not get into Asda because we've got a child behind us that won't let us in there, you know, but that's our common denominator, and that's but I do think it's very easy to think for us as forums to be tick box too. We need to be really mindful of how we approach and how we build that relationship.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jane. So I'm just going to start sharing my screen. Okay. And what you have in the chat, please, is a link to a Microsoft form, and we're asking you to make a pledge. Okay. So if you click on the link, it asks you what parent forum you're from, and I ask you to think about, basically what I'm asking is to think about something that you feel passionate about, that's maybe resonating in you now, something that's kind of made a spark in you during this session, and you've gone, I'm going to do that. We need to do this. We need to talk about that, or we need to think about how we do and go about that. So just want you to take a couple of seconds to just write down a little pledge for us, following a little commitment. All right. So final slide then, just to say that there are some organisations here that Contact would like you to know about, okay, for potentially delivering training around EDI for your parent forums. Okay, so I think these slides are going to come out after anyway, so you'll have this information. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody. I've really enjoyed it myself.
I really enjoyed it too. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Can I just say a few words, Katie, just before everyone
finishes? Please do.
Just want to say a big thanks to you, Katie, because I think that was really thought-provoking, and I think, you know, there was obviously a lot for forums to think about. And just to remind everybody that we haven't put them on yet, but there will be 2 versions of an EDI policy. One, a longer policy for forums that are really established and might have staff, and another shorter policy for forums just starting out who are probably reliant on volunteers, who might want to add to that as they develop. And you know, the longer policy will probably be underpinned by other policies, sort of staff, maternity, and all of those things. We didn't want it to be scary. It's hard to develop template policies, but just remember as well that you've got access to Community Matters and their knowledge bank, and also their template policies, but also they are happy to look over policies that you develop and check them, but they'd only charge a small fee for that. So just to bear that in mind. So I just want to say a big thank you to everybody for joining and for staying with us tonight, and we hope that you found it useful. So thank you very much to everybody. Good night and take care, and thanks again to Katie.
Thank you. Thanks everyone. Have a good evening.